This week on the Lords of Grantham podcast, we break down Poldark Season 5 in its entirety. What did we like? What did we dislike? And how did the characters shake out in the power rankings? So tune in.
It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
And we are back once again in one of many breakdowns of Poldark. This week we're breaking down the last season, Season 5. But how you doing, Corey?
I'm doing just fine. How about you, Dave?
I'm great. Did you have a good Easter?
It was okay, you know. Went to the Olive Garden.
Oh, wow. When you're there, your family. That's right.
Keeping it, not fancy, but, mid-level.
Hey, all those breadsticks?
Yeah, you know. Got a carbo load over here, running a lot. How about you, Dave?
The same, family stuff.
You went to Olive Garden also?
No, I did not. Well, I was with family, so I didn't need to go somewhere to be family.
Well, you could have joined ours, because when you're there, you're family, as they say.
I know, exactly. Yeah, that's where Dom Toretto met Brian O'Connor, was at the Olive Garden. That's how it all started.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I wish there was more news out there to update people on. Michelle Dockery.
What about this big news? This big drama?
What drama?
This thing for the crown.
But that's not real actual drama.
Yeah, but it's something. It was in the news. I saw the headline. So for people that don't know, Gillian Anderson, there was some drama about her. It's Gillian. The one from Community is Gillian, but she's spelled the same way. Gillian Anderson was rumored to be refusing to come back on to play Thatcher.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out it was just a red herring. She was like, that's not true.
Yeah, they were saying that they needed approval for her to come back as Thatcher. And that's what she said was, in her words, a load of bollocks. Even though Gillian Anderson is not British, but she might as well be at this point.
Yeah. Maybe she just didn't want to hang out with her ex-husband.
Yeah, I think that only picked up traction because she responded to it, not because it's an actual, news item.
I mean, I think, and the headline was major actor on The Crown refuses to participate. I was like, uh-oh, who is this? And it's Thatcher? She's irrelevant. She's not. Only. I guess, what's his name came back? Churchill.
He did, but that was they had footage that they could reuse with him in it.
But it was with Coleman.
Yeah, I don't know, man. We'll talk about The Crown at another time. I'm not even thinking about The Crown right now.
Yeah, I wasn't until that story came up. It's like, people are talking about this?
Yeah, just let it be. But
we're here to talk about Poldark.
Well, one other thing. I did say Michelle Dockery, she's going to be in a Tom Hanks movie. I saw that reported widely, and it's like, okay, well, I'm glad she's getting work. But on Top Chef, the TV show Top Chef, they are going to Highclere Castle to cook. So
okay,
we may be talking about that on a future episode, just because we have to talk everything related to Highclere and Down.
Yeah. I'd say once the dust settles on Poldark, or maybe I know you're going away, if we want to kill some time, get a quick episode in before, we can do that. Top Chef isn't the secret ingredient one, right? That's Chopped?
I think that's Chopped. I've never actually watched Top Chef, even though I know people love that show.
Yeah, neither have I. But I'm sure we can catch on.
We're here to talk about Poldark Season 5.
Yes. Now, before any of our listeners might get a little perturbed with us, today we are strictly talking Season 5. When we talk Seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4, we talked about the show cumulatively. But considering we have the whole show to look back on and reflect on, we're giving that its own episode. We're going to break down the final power rankings like we did with Downton Abbey. So we won't be discussing how this shapes up necessarily. I mean, we might rank the seasons when we're done, but we're not going to say Ross's entire arc from the pilot all the way to here. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about Ross before he was a secret agent to when he was a secret agent.
Yeah, these 8 episodes.
Yes.
So, Dave, season 5, was it good or not? Let's just start off the top.
I think, we're talking about ranking. I think it's the worst season of the show.
I would agree.
And I think a lot of people say this is when they go off the rails from what the books are. Mm-hmm. And I think you see the same thing in Game of Thrones when they lose track of the narrative and you just leave it to these TV writers. It's not always good.
No. The biggest knock against the season is just that it feels different. The drama isn't rooted in, we always joke about it, but it's a show about miners and mines. A lot of it doesn't take place remotely tied to the mines, but on top of that, it's less about George and Ross, but more so Ross helping out a friend and his entanglement with these two other political figures. And you just spend a lot of time during the season wondering, why are we doing this? What is going on here? Mm-hmm. It feels like a side story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like, and we'll get down to more of the characters specifically, I think, because I was listening to our breakdown of season 4 this afternoon just to see how we paced that one and talked about that. Mm-hmm. We discussed, and also in discussing The Crown, we said that one of our frustrations with this most recent season of The Crown was the fact that Elizabeth and Philip have been telling the same story for 3 seasons. These two are not compatible, and despite their incompatibility, they make it work and they're loyal to each other. But are they perfect for each other? And I feel like with Ross and Demelza, we've been dealing with a different story that we've been telling about trust and communication for 3 or 4 seasons. For the whole show, it feels like. Mm-hmm. Once Demelza settles in, it just feels like we lock into that, and that's it.
Yeah. And part of it is just that where they left things at the end of last season, they did have some loose ends with Morwenna and Drake, and then also the sudden death of Elizabeth. But in terms of Ross and Demelza, they had kind of sorted through all their damage. They were pretty happy where we left them. And since they're the two central figures of this story, we don't see much further development in terms of their relationship this season. If you want to track that...
They don't get a honeymoon season. If you want to say, okay, well, they're 1A and 1B, let's just let them be the puppet masters this season while everything is going well for them. That's not the case at all. They're still kind of bickering and communicating poorly.
And that's a majority of the plot line for them, is just everyone trying to rein in Ross a little bit, from Dwight to Wickham or whenever some other side character would show up, be like, Ross, what are you doing, man? Come back to Earth. Come back to Cornwall. He would just kind of keep going off on these, side missions to help out Ned. And so, in terms of Demelza and Ross, we're seeing their relationship play out how I guess it would if there wasn't any drama going on with George. But at the same time, it just turns into what are we doing here? We're kind of spinning our wheels in some ways.
Yeah, and one of the last beats between Ross and George in the finale is Demelza telling him, kind of nodding about the paternity of Valentine. Mm-hmm. There's this sort of, let it go, Ross. Whereas, I feel like there shouldn't be some sort of tension in that issue at this point between them and in this part of the story.
Right, because we already had that big blow-off at the end of last season where it's revealed to George that he may not be the father of Valentine. He reckons with it. It results in Elizabeth's, passing, his frustration and everything. And there's stuff to mind there with George, which they do this season. But in terms of how Ross figures into it, it's just like, hey there, little buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Even to the point where Dwight sees the medication that has caused Elizabeth to die at the end of last season. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of his, smoking gun that he can pull at any time. His plot device that we can complicate the story with, and he can always just lay this on Ross. And now Ross has an emotional burden to deal with.
Right.
And he gets right to the doorstep of doing that. And he says, Ross, you're the cause of all these problems. You need to cool down. But he never says, you've basically forced Elizabeth to kill herself.
I don't think he forced her to. He is more so he kind of contributed to.
He put her in that situation.
Many factors that put her in a poor mental state.
Yeah, she killed herself because of your action, partially because of your actions.
Right, and well, she unknowingly killed herself. Let's not be so.
Yeah, but she knew the risk.
Yes and no. I think she was kind of lost.
The doctor said this might kill you, and she did it.
We'll relitigate that next week. But
yeah,
either way, she was gone, and they didn't do much with it in terms of how it affected Ross. And to that point, Ross was so busy with Ned that it was just like, oh, why? What are we learning? What did we learn about Ross this season that we didn't already know? Sorry.
That he's reckless. He's the same Ross.
He's the same Ross. Doesn't matter if he's domesticated or not. And it even ends up worse by the end of the season where he's out on a mission leaving his pregnant wife at home. So it really kind of almost regresses Ross a little bit, that he's not maturing from what we've seen, even when he was in the political atmosphere and stuff where he was kind of having some responsibilities and owning it. Here he's just like, you know what, I'm just a man of action. I'm going to keep doing that. Sorry, Demelza. Sorry I had to lie to you for multiple months.
I was the hero of the story, and I saved us from a French invasion. And by the way, I'm going out, and I'm going to help the government more.
Yeah.
Like, it really does not seem like a season finale, or a series finale.
No, which makes it all the more clear why people keep asking, when is it coming back, or will it come back, or anything like that.
I mean, I would be open I would love it for it to come back.
Right, but it doesn't sound like they have any plans in the near term to actually do that. Well, I think that's Ross' side of things. Demelza, too, she was given at least some interesting stuff with... Well, I don't even want to say interesting, but she was given something to do with Tess. Because you see... We already saw it when Ross was doing his political stumping, that she would kind of run the operations back home. But now she has this issue of this Tess character who's kind of just an upstart who wants to create some change that helps.
Yeah, some little anarchist of sorts, just sort of destroy what works here.
Yeah, and maybe help some poorer people, but really it's just kind of upsetting these people who have it so well off. And that's all well and good, but it kind of goes nowhere. Demelza takes her in. She almost burns down their house, is caught up in helping to steal ore, and she just is bad at her job, so she lets her go. And then she just continues to be a thorn in their side. But it doesn't really add up to much for Demelza. Maybe she's a little bit more upset at Ross when she finds out that he may have been with her in the finale, but at the same time, it could have been any woman, and she probably would have been just as justified in terms of being upset.
Yeah, it could have been a French woman. Yeah, and she doesn't... There's no moment in that last episode where she's like, Tess of all people, Ross, you know how much I hate her. You hate her, too. Mm-hmm. It feels very hollow and unfair for Demelza. Like, the character they constantly refer to as the skullduggery maid. You want to see her really triumph at the end of the show, and she seems to be put in housewife mode at the end of the show. That's
not to say there aren't bright moments for her. I would say she's very good in terms of encouraging the Karn boys and pursuing their significant others and finding happiness. And she is good at holding down the fort with Zaki in tow and stuff, and investigating what's going on with the ore and stuff like that.
Ore, yeah.
She's very much her own woman of action, and so it's more so in her relationship with Ross where I think the show kind of fails her a little bit in giving her an even playing ground or something new to investigate with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Obviously, she's given stuff to do, and she's the anchor of the show. She's the sort of the surrogate for us, the sort of person roped into this world who then succeeds and becomes one of the leaders of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's them. That's the Poldark couple. I mean,
it's unfortunate that we can get them out of the way so easily in the beginning. But yeah.
And it sounds like we're really down in the season. Why don't we jump to something we did like about the season? Dave, what is something you did like about the season?
What did I like about this season? I like Drake and Morwenna's having as I say this, I realize there's still plot holes in their story that don't get all the way resolved. But I do like how it works for Drake and Morwenna, and that Morwenna finds something to do with the school.
Yeah.
she kind of helps Rosina come back into the fold, and despite all of the Tess meddling, which also gets dropped like a sack of potatoes, Tess trying to get with Sam just to throw a monkey wrench into poor Rosina's life, who, by the way, Tess's best friend and coworker and co-conspirator is Rosina's father. So she's actively screwing with her friend's daughter just to screw with Sam, who's a preacher. He's not well off. And but I like Drake and Morwenna have the high emotional beats of the season, I think.
I will say I like the Drake and Morwenna stuff. It was predictable is the only thing for me. Like, we knew we were going to get there. But the one thing I did really like about their story this year, we made fun of it, was her creeping on the little child, on her son. her peeping.
That's kind of a plot hole of the season, is that once she's pregnant with Drake's kid, John Conan seems to go to the back of her head. And I mean, obviously she needs some sort of therapist. And as we've talked about in the past, Poldark does a thing where, like, you cope with some crippling issue in a week, and then you've moved on, like PTSD for Armitage and Dwight. So, yeah, but that was, I mean, it was entertaining to watch her, this poor little meek woman, trespass to talk to a toddler.
It was fun, though. It was fun.
I'm glad we got to go on that ride.
It was a little soapy. That's the thing. It doesn't feel as much as there's like some, that interpersonal soap opera stuff going on. I mean, you got stabs of that with Sam and Rosina and stuff, but Tess as a third party to that wasn't developed enough for me to really invest in any drama there.
She was so clearly that kind of
one note
monkey wrench getting thrown into the engine. Yeah.
I'll say the one thing I think that worked the best in this season, I front to back, is still George. He had an actual arc.
It wasn't considering who he is to the show, it wasn't the most logical and satisfying arc, but it was indeed an arc.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it was a bit broad, a bit silly, but I'm here for some of the silliness. I mean, in a show where you have Ross punching a man in the face every other episode, why not have a man see ghosts every couple episodes and talk to himself?
And then get, almost thrown into an asylum and then get cured again. Like, we talk about one episode with Dwight and he's back to normal.
Yep. But George is still haunted even by the end of the show. Like, even when he's theoretically cured, there's a moment where he's like talking to himself and Uncle Carrie asks him, "What are you talking about, huh?" Oh, nothing.
And then he sees Elizabeth's ghost walking into Truro. Right at the end of the show. That's like his last moment in the show.
Yeah. But what you see is him kind of coming into his own, and it kind of follows through on where he was before, where like last season, when he had kind of turned on Elizabeth, he was also giving up some of his duties as a parent in some ways, because he was resenting her and Valentine. So you see him...
And Ursula. Well, Ursula didn't come until the very end.
Yeah, but you see him kind of reclaiming that once he kind of comes to his senses, like, this kid is annoying and he's taking on after Ross too much, but it is still his son and he's still trying to, entertain him by giving him a mind and stuff like that in his own way.
And he does kind of end the show, which is unfortunate to make Valentine a prop more than a character, but when he's like, don't talk to my son anymore. Please.
Yeah. And also, the show actually, I think it does a good job of juxtaposing him with like true bad people. We've seen George do some really bad stuff on the show. Obviously.
I think this is the season that gives him his ethical code that he abides by.
Right. He's very much, I think, codified by his status. What he has within his purview that he owns, and he's not willing, I think, to kind of, betray people to get more. I mean, you do see him going along with Hanson and Merceron, but he's also kind of checked out when they're saying like slavery, and he's like, yeah, and he's riding for it. But he's definitely not all there, and that's not to absolve him entirely. He's also about to marry a girl just to spite his son-in-law, and keep something going. His stepson, right. But it's still a son-in-law, isn't it? A stepson.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But I think he also realizes, too, like, yeah, I don't need to do this. I'm not ready to marry. He even tells Uncle Carrie in confidence. It's all kind of part of his transactions, and that's really what you see with George. Is at the end of the day, he's a transactional man, and it has to make sense to him. And you know what? Ross has just run him astray too many times. That's what's kind of pushed him along this whole time. He's done with it. So,
yeah, I mean that's kind of how his arc. Unlike Ross, who kind of stays the same, George kind of goes through this journey of mental illness and being manipulated by these two more evil people, and just kind of landing on his feet where he ended, or where he started season 4, where he's still kind of a money-hungry guy who loves the things that he loves, but he now has a bit a notch more, decision-making skills and code of ethics.
Yeah, it's he's not as self-serving as he was before because he realizes that there's consequences for what he does, which was Elizabeth essentially. Which Ross, ironically, doesn't seem to learn. But it's not because, when they have a drink at the end of the series, there, I think that's more because George met him halfway, saved his butt by killing the French guy and shooting the other guy in the leg. It's more so because George meets him halfway, not because Ross does anything to kind of meet where George is at. Because as much as Ross says, come on, George, let's be friends, you're still coveting the dude's wife all the time. So come on. Come on, Ross.
Yeah, and Ross is always, this goes back to their childhood relationship.
Yeah.
Ross was always putting toads in his pants. Yeah. Ross always has the upper hand. We see it in the premiere of season 4, the flashback scene with Francis, Ross, and George and Elizabeth, where they're like, well, Ross is the one who's got her heart. And and Francis is kind of like a klutz, and George is kind of the Joker, kind of just like, I just want to, cause some chaos right now. And and this plays through, the relationship is what it is. And I feel like as they part ways, they're like, it is what it is.
Yeah. And also, it's also George being willing to turn a page where he's going to close Trenwith, he's going to move elsewhere, and Ross isn't so much just turning a page as he's like, I'm just going to keep doing me.
Yeah, well, I think George could have the babyface turn and say, I'm giving my house to Jeffrey Charles.
Yeah, ain't going to happen.
I'm going to leave your mine alone, and I'm going to get out of town, and I'm done with this place. But he can't, he can't be the good guy, which is, I think, another reason why people want to see another season of this show is because it doesn't tie everything up nicely. It just ties everything up.
Yeah.
Many things. It doesn't tie up Ross. It sends Ross away.
Well, Jeffrey Charles, too. Well, why don't we talk about him? His whole season is him falling for this girl, Cicely, the daughter of one of these entrepreneurs.
Ralph Hansen.
Yeah, bad man. And ultimately, it leads to him getting expelled from the military. He doesn't end up marrying this girl, and he's single by the end of the season, and he's still alone, and he's...
Which is a lot of wasted time, all things considered.
Yeah. And he's like
especially
Dr.
considering
Who.
you recast him, you make him an older character. Every season.
And this guy is he's a bad version. Like, sometimes there's some bad doctors in Doctor Who. This is a bad version of Jeffrey Charles.
Yeah. This is the worst Jeffrey Charles for sure. Because we were complaining about last Jeffrey Charles, who was just like a doofy frat boy.
Yeah.
This Jeffrey Charles is like a dope, just like a dumb adult who hasn't learned anything.
Right. And that's where there's the discord I think you're getting at a little bit. Is like the last one was like a frat boy. This one seems like a prep boy who hasn't learned anything. Yeah. He's a little bit more preppy. So it's not the same as the Jeffrey Charles.
But he's also like negligible in age. He's not like, well, this guy looks like he's like 6 or 7 years older.
No. You
could have had this other last Jeffrey Charles put a fake beard on him, a little dust on his face, and he would look 22 or 23.
He looks as old as Francis.
Yeah.
But that's what they do with GC this year. Doesn't add up to much.
It's not even worth discussing. It's so upsetting. To the point in the last episode when it's like, well, Jeffrey Charles, your first love is not your last love. It's like, what? This is a TV show. His first love should be like, if we're operating by soap opera rules, then he should just be able to, she should walk around the corner when they say, your first love is not the best, and then she say, well, I'm here, and he, but no, this show does not care. This season does not care about resolving things nicely.
Look, I know they got to follow the books and do what happens there, but in some ways I kind of wish Jeffrey Charles died when he did. So it would just be another thing to drive home to Ross that, like, hey, this thing you're involved in was trying to help him run away and be with this girl. You indirectly led to this kid's death, just another way to drive home. Like,
where he is effectively, not single-handedly, but he has had a hand in this entire branch of his own family dying.
Exactly.
Where he can't save Francis when Francis falls in the water. He forces Elizabeth to, he unwillingly forces Elizabeth to take this medication that winds up killing her. And he's so reckless that he lets Jeffrey Charles do this wild thing that winds up causing him his life.
Yep.
That would be interesting. But I don't think the show knows how to give Ross an emotional beat.
Yeah.
And if you want to tilt this conversation towards our 3 new characters, or, 4 new characters, Ned, Ralph, Merceron, Wickham, that whole drama of it all. Mm-hmm. Ned has that comment when they're trying to break him out of prison where he's like, Ross, enough is enough. You have responsibilities. You have a life. We're not going to keep putting this on the line just for the moral victory. Enough is enough. And Ross is like, what are you talking about, man? Like, did Ross not learn from that? Ned got hung.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he immediately forgets about like what went wrong there, and he throws himself into more trouble. But also, it's partially because he gets caught by a Frenchman randomly down by the beach because he thinks he's snooping on who has ore. So random. But the Ned character, it's interesting because really all he does is show you thought Ross was crazy. You don't know crazy until you met Ned Despard. This guy is wilding out.
But Ned has that moment of growth where he's like, stop, we got to stop being crazy.
But watch me jump over this chasm right here. Look at this.
Like, I know I jumped over the chasm last week, but I'm not climbing through the sewers. This ain't Shawshank. I'm not doing this.
Which, I mean, he could have so got away clean. It would have been so easy. Like, well, come on, man. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, Ned was an interesting, lively character. But I think it was too much of a distraction from the central characters that I don't think it was ultimately worth it.
I think Ned falls into the category, along with Thawley, and to a lesser extent Judd, of sort of flawed father figures for Ross. And I think we could have done this with Thawley.
Because it would have had more resonance. Like I don't know if they maybe struggled to get those actors back. They could have just recast the role. Like it wouldn't have been that. They've recast Jeffrey Charles every season. Or
you could have just said Thawley's brother.
Yeah, or
you just tie it to the story without making it like, oh, this real life person who was really hung and decapitated.
Yeah.
Not like you just make it like, we already know Thawley's got a daughter. Mm-hmm. So why not give him a brother or a son or something that puts Ross in the same, or have like Dwight get put in this sort of situation as platoon member or something like that.
Yeah, just something to tie it close to home without doing all this legwork to introduce this person and really establish that they're boys and they're friends and stuff like that.
Or just bring back Ross's dad. We don't know. Like, I'm sure they've told us about Ross's father, but like, go crazy if you're leaving the book. We always say it with The Crown. Say goodbye. If you're allowed to go crazy, go crazy.
Or bring back, that one guy they had to search for who knew about the other mine that they did find.
The one who tried to kill Dwight.
Yeah, bring him back. Yeah.
Didn't they do that already?
Well, yeah, because they had to track him down to find out about the other mine, but he's out there.
I think I'm good on that character.
Okay. All right. But yeah, I think they did a good job, at least with like positioning Merceron and Hanson as like these bad boys that do mean business. They're very good showing evil on the show.
They're like caricatures.
Yeah, they're always twisting their mustache, their imaginary mustache.
They could have just given them a literal mustache too.
Could have.
Would have made the show a little bit more dynamic visually. They all look the same.
I think that covers the broad strokes of the season. I guess we haven't talked about Dwight and Caroline yet. That's the last of the big pieces.
That's another silly one where Caroline spends the whole season thinking Dwight's got the hots for Kitty.
That I don't believe that. I think that's literally something that came up in the last 2 episodes, if that. And it was all rooted in her feeling like she wasn't getting enough attention. The Kitty, he did not show any hots for Kitty at all during the season.
Yeah, and why would you? Because clearly Ned would murder someone for her. So why would you hit on her?
Yeah, he's not doing that.
That'd be like hitting on your aunt. Why would you do that?
But Dwight continues to get a high work rate on the show, though. Them bringing him in to kind of help George come back to us. Great application of Dwight.
Dwight is a great utility player in this show. You can plug him in anywhere and he works. Mm-hmm. He helps Ross break into the prison to get Ned out.
Yeah.
And then he's also on the stand saying that the guy who tried to assassinate the king is crazy. And then he has the guilt trip of sending that guy to the insane asylum. Dwight really is the ultimate movable piece of this chessboard.
You can put him in a basement where he has to poop for an hour or two by himself, and it still works.
Yeah, we're here for that.
Yeah. Caroline did have some good moments towards the end of the season where she kind of figured out what was going on with George.
In her own head? Yeah. With George.
Yeah, so Dwight could, or so she could, leverage that to be left alone and stuff.
And she was feet on the ground in London when they needed to spread out literature, and Dwight and Caroline assisted in the finding of that evidence they were planting under Ross's mattress.
It was just enough with her. It took a while to get there, but it was just enough with her.
And I think it hit the ending we all knew it was going to hit, where she basically says, "I'd never appropriately mourned the loss of our infant."
Yeah.
And now I have thought about it, and I regret putting you through this emotionally, so let's move forward.
The ending, too, doesn't feel resolved, where it's like, oh, yeah, Dwight's going to go join Ross to help out, and they don't really make a big point of that. Especially considering
especially because she's
like,
I want to get pregnant again, and I want to have a family.
Yeah. It
would be one thing if she's like, I think I'm pregnant, and I'm going to have a baby, and then Demelza is like, well, good. We can be deadbeat mothers or mothers with deadbeat fathers together while our husbands risk their lives for the crown.
I would watch them supporting each other. I'd watch that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that kind of wraps up all the major characters, right? I mean, Uncle Carrie is the last piece who's... I did like him stepping up this season, where he was definitely used a little bit more in place of George speaking for himself. And to good comedic effect, where he's kind of like, "Oh no, I can't do that."
He's kind of the stiff Aunt Agatha. He's George's Aunt Agatha by this point, where he's just kind of comic relief.
Yeah, fun guy to have around.
Yeah. So, do you want to get into these power rankings of the whole season?
Let's go.
Now, I will say this is the most unusual of all of our singular seasons so far. So,
okay.
For those that might be new to this, I don't know if you are. I'm glad you're here this time. We've done this four times before with Poldark. We tally the power rankings that we have put at the end of every episode into a spreadsheet. Corey's combined with mine, and then we add them up with a numeric value, and we see who, according to the numbers, the data, had the best and worst season. So we'll start at the bottom. In third place, -6, which means this person has been voted down in the negative power rankings enough time to have -6 points. Who do you think it is, Corey?
I think George had a rough season.
Okay. No, it's not George.
Okay.
One more guess.
Is it Hanson?
Close. It's Merceron.
Okay.
Because I think Hanson has a few more up weeks.
Yeah, where he
gets his way. Where Merceron is like a secondary character who just gets dumped on in those last few episodes, which is really all you need to. So,
yep,
couple bad weeks.
That tracks. I mean, Mercer, I think, peaks when they reveal that he was it Wickham's brother. And it's like, you didn't know this the whole time?
I had to rewind that, like, what? Huh?
You don't even look alike.
But Wickham's never revealed to be like a bad guy. Ross still
he's just
talks to him
job
at the end of the show. All right, jumping down from -6 to -8, second place. Who do you think it is?
I feel like Morwenna got a lot of L's early in the season.
No.
Tess?
Wrong. It is Tess. It is indeed
Tess. Okay.
Because I think that she never, whenever things were going well for her, they were never going really well. They were just sort of baseline. They were just sort of even.
Yeah. Yeah, she just kind of is involved in all these operations that fail, except for the one time she helps Hanson out. And even then, they never really follow up on that or anything. It was just like a one-time
and that's
deal.
Like Jacka just as much as her.
Yeah.
But we don't care about Jacka.
No, they barely have Jacka show up.
So which leaves us to the worst performing person this season, -15. Big jump from -8.
Oh, man. I mean, George again? Is that if it's not?
It's George.
It is George.
I think we forget that he spends the bulk of the season
in a
seeing
nightgown.
a ghost and being played around by Merceron and Hanson.
That's fair. He is really, really tripping out this season. But I don't think I was as negative on him as some other characters.
No, I was way more negative about George than you.
Yeah,
I think most of the episodes that he had an active plot, he always ranked the lowest because he's getting leeches put on his back. And I think even at the end when you had him ranked high for shooting the French guy.
I mean, that was the best.
I didn't have him all the way up because I thought he still got a lot of.
This guy went from having a leech leeching off him all over to blowing some guys away. So kudos to George.
Well, yeah, that's the negative. Now the positives are very interesting.
Okay.
So we'll start in third place. +5 points.
Drake Karn?
No, but not far off.
Sam Karn?
No, it's Morwenna Karn.
Oh, okay.
I guess she really doesn't have any terrible weeks, you know?
Well,
she
her chasing around a child, but...
she's having fun.
It's all in good fun. But yeah, she does have a child, and they're happily ever after, so by that merit, good for her.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Good little redemption season for her, considering she was just basically dragged through the mud all last season by Whitworth.
Yeah. I will say, though, on that note, though, of like, good for her that she's pregnant, the show does a weird thing with the season where it's like the only happy endings they can think up for these women are either getting pregnant or trying to get pregnant. And it's like, do you really think that's the only way that women could have happiness back there, writers? Could you be a little bit more creative?
Yeah, like you could easily have like Caroline or one of these other characters that are in the city or Cecily say like, I just want to be a debutante or a rich person's daughter in the city and a socialite.
I mean, on some level, them starting the school itself and being a success is a W enough. So it's a little bit reductive to say, well, she needs to get pregnant to be really, really happy. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. Okay, so going up to second place with +7 points. Who do you got?
Dwight?
Nope.
Uncle Carrie?
Dwight had... Who'd you say?
Uncle Carrie?
Uncle Carrie? No, I was going to say, as you said, Dwight. Dwight was right below Morwenna with +4. It's okay. Caroline.
I mean, I guess.
She's an ultimate assist in this season. Like, we said it with her and Dwight helping people, and then her kind of finding herself at the end. She doesn't do a whole lot, but I guess she does enough that's good. She never winds up in the red.
Right. Yeah, it just works out well enough for her.
All right, so this is insane.
I mean, it's got to be Demelza. She always wins.
It's a 3-way tie for first place. +10 points for all 3 characters.
Well, Demelza's definitely one of them.
Yep.
I think your charity to Ross probably elevated him up there.
Yep.
And Sam Karn?
It's Drake Karn.
Is it those three?
It's those three.
Ross?
Sam had positive 3.
Okay. Wait, that's all you needed to be at the top was a 3?
No. Sam had positive 3. Drake had positive 10.
Oh, so it's Drake Karn. So it's Drake, Ross,
Drake, Ross, Demelza tied at first place.
Wow. I mean, Drake was really supportive. He definitely was this year.
And you talk about a guy who got dunked on. This is a guy who got his shop burned down like twice.
Yeah.
He's been put through it, and he comes out on top, and he's a supportive husband. And then all of a sudden, he gets laid, and then he gets his wife pregnant.
That's all he needed. I mean, to be totally clear, though, for me, Ross netted out to just 1 point. So it's not.
And he netted out to positive 9 for me.
Jeez, Louise, you weren't grilling him as much as you should have this year.
I was, I guess not. Drake, we both kind of had him in a good spot, and Demelza, we both had her even.
Yeah, I just had a couple weeks where Demelza did good because Demelza was kind of in the gray area all year, where she wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst, so it was just fine. And then she had some good weeks. But I think honestly, she runs away with this show either way, so it makes sense that she's up there.
Yeah.
So that's season 5.
That's season 5, and I think we should probably zip our lips about going forward into the rest of the show because we're going to talk about it at length next week.
We'll rank the seasons next time.
Yeah, and I think we did, I think it's been a long time because only once in the history of the show have we gotten to cumulatively discuss power rankings of the whole show. So we might do a top, I think... I will tell you off the top from my spreadsheet that there were, between the two of us, where is it? Why did I scroll so far down? There's like 75 characters that we've put on our power rankings.
Sounds about right.
So I think not quite as dense, or, dense is the opposite, not quite as many characters as Down Abbey. So I don't know if we could do a top 10 and a bottom 10, but we could definitely do 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Like, we could really get into the nitty-gritty of these characters.
I mean, some of those characters are just mines also.
Yeah, well, I don't think France is going to crack the top or bottom of anything.
No, the French.
Unfortunately for them.
Yeah. But that's this week on Us Talking Poldark. Thank you for listening all the way if you stuck around.
Yeah.
Dave, what else have you been watching?
I've been catching up on my show. Succession was buck wild this week.
Wowin'. One of the best episodes of TV in recent memory, far and away.
Shockingly, like, something they're playing with me. The whole time I was like, they're messing with me.
Yeah. Incredible.
And, I mean, I think we're going to have to talk about it a lot more on Patreon after this week, but Love is Blind, Season 4.
How far are you, man?
I think I'm on before we pushed, record,
Yep.
I was right at the beginning of Kwame's wedding.
Oh, okay.
So I'm right when the juice really starts to get there.
To be honest, I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for this Sunday night where at 8 o'clock we get the live reunion on The Love is Blind, and then 9 o'clock we get the new episode of Succession. I don't know if I can take that. That's a lot.
And then is Barry right after?
And Barry's right after. 2 episodes of Barry are right after. That's a Sunday night of TV right there. Peak TV is back.
Yeah, including Love is Blind. We're lumping that in there.
This is, I texted you last night, but this is a bounce back season. Season 3 was okay. This has got some characters.
Yeah, I feel like season 3 was like a feeder for Perfect Match.
Yeah.
We needed to get Bartiz in the system to get him into Perfect Match, but this season we're back.
Yeah, it is off the wall. The fact that people can just leave this season without having to do the whole going down the aisle thing and then potentially choose other partners is just like, what? You can just do that?
Yeah. It's wild. It is truly...
The ring thing is... my jaw dropped just as wide as it did during Succession.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think if you know us and you've listened to the show, we can and we will densely discuss Love is Blind behind the paywall.
Yeah.
If you what about you? Been watching anything? Have you been watching anything different, Corey?
I finished Physical 100 on Netflix, which is a physical competition show. That was okay. But I needed another Korean show because I'm learning Korean, so I'm keeping that up. I started watching this one that was very popular last year. My mom was telling me about, Extraordinary Attorney Woo. And it's about an autistic lawyer. And it's really good.
Okay. Better than The Good Doctor?
It's hard to say if it treats it quite as correctly as it should, but I like it a lot. I think you like it, Dave.
Well, no, The Good Doctor, I think that commercial is one of the most strange.
That's the one with the autistic doctor,
is there anyone here
right?
who's a doctor? It's like, I am, but I'm autistic. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, there is a bit of that where she has to kind of let people know she's autistic on the show. But in Korea, it's called the odd attorney, which is like the weird attorney. It's like, that's not the right word.
Yeah,
Thank God they translated.
Cultures move at different speeds.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, you know where to find us in the interim. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can email us at lordsgrantham@gmail.com. As Dave said, we have a Patreon. You can subscribe to that and talk with us in the Lords Grantham Lounge. You can always leave a 5-star rating and review if you so choose on any platform you listen to us on. You can find all our episodes on our Podbean. But until then, we'll see you next week on the Lords Grantham Podcast.